Hello, and welcome to another Farbank Fly Fishing School episode. In this episode, I'm going to take a look at the joy of fishing in small rivers and creeks. For some, it is all that's available to them. For others, it's an escape to a more personal, more intimate location, a place to lose and challenge oneself. Whatever reason it is, fly fishing in small creeks requires new skills, adaptation of cast, unique fishing techniques, and a different approach to regular-sized rivers. So let's plunge into this episode and see just how to fly fish a small creek. The first thing we probably need to talk about is what is a creek. A creek is simply a small river. It could be a brook, you could call it a leat for where I'm from, a burn, lots of names from, but basically they're just small rivers that are like fishing in Lilliput, right? Small little bits of water that, because they're so small, require different approach to your regular rivers. And there's lots of different types of creek. The most famous one is called a spring creek, and really that type of creek is a creek that comes out of the ground from a spring and flows down and creates a fishery. Spring creeks are generally hard to fish. The fish are a little bit more technical, the water's slower. The water's clearer, the fish are a bit more spooky and wary. Spring creeks tend to be a little harder to fish than your regular type of rivers. There's a freestone type river, and that is a river basically that's snow-meld, coming out of a mountain, running out of a lake, but just tumbling down, more of a natural one. And in those rivers and creeks, the fish are a little bit less spooky and wary, and they're a little bit easier to catch. And perhaps the other type of water to talk about briefly is a tailwater, and that is a water that comes out of the bottom of a dam and is generated literally from the outflow of a lake that's created a dam and the water flows out. That's what a tailwater is. Now, those terms apply to any size of river, but this particular episode deals with the smaller versions of any of those, what are called creeks. So that is what a creek is. Now let's take a look at exactly why would you fish a creek. The most obvious reason to fish a creek is that that's all you've got around you. You live in the Swiss Alps. There's no big rivers. They're all small little streams and small little creeks. So when you have no option, the creeks are what you're going to be fishing. But when you have options and you live in an area where you're lucky enough to have little rivers and big rivers and lakes and a multitude of fisheries, why would you choose a creek? Well, two reasons. One, I think they're fun. They're personal. They're intimate. You're part of the surroundings. You're close to the fish. Everything becomes just a lot closer and you're more involved, I think, in these small creeks. I love little creeks because you can get lost in them wandering around. Even if you've got a bunch of big rivers near you, those creeks are just another element that adds to the enjoyment of the day. But perhaps more importantly than that, there's a kind of a seasonal type. When the summer gets on and the water and the air temperatures rise, bigger rivers tend to be at lower elevations, they warm up quicker. River temperatures start to get a little bit too dangerous to start fishing for trout in, so you tend not to fish fisheries like that. In those situations, head for the high ground. Go up into the mountains, go up to those smaller creeks, get away from those warmer water conditions and those spooky fish, and get up to the freestones and those lovely natural creeks up in the mountains. So plenty of reasons to go up and fish creeks. They're a lot of fun. If you've got them nearby, I would absolutely suggest you go and find a creek and hit it. And to do so, you need a certain amount of particular gear, and we're going to take a look at that in the very next chapter. The most obvious thing to fish a small river is you need a small rod. Rods that are 9 foot long, which is your staple trout rod in most situations, are going to be way too long when you're enclosed by trees and you've only got 10 or 12 or 15 foot of river in front of you. So an ideal rod length is going to be something like 6 foot, 7 foot, 7'6", something like that. This is a 7'6" rod. That is ideal in your small to medium-sized creeks. If you're going to fish even smaller creeks, then you want to go to a rod like this. This is 6'9". It's a tiny little rod, but it's absolutely ideal in tiny little creeks. It means I can cast and not get my rod tip jammed in the trees above me. Perfect. You're also not going to be casting very far because the creek may be 20 foot wide or 15 foot wide. So that short rod helps get some fly line out to be able to make the cast. And talking of fly lines, when you do go to fish a creek, you're going to fish lighter weight lines. This is a 3 weight right here, you can see. That's probably the heaviest creek line I would ever fish. This actually is called a creek line. I like the creek line because the creek line is a line designed to fish small rivers because it is very front loaded. What that means is you can make very short casts and have a weight in the fly line to help make that cast. Specifically designed for creek, so a really good type of line to have. 3 weight, 2 weight, 1 weight, whatever rod size you've got. And because you've got those lighter lines, you do need a lighter weight reel. This is a 2 weight reel with a 2 weight line on. Obviously that's going to go onto a 2 weight rod. So your system is still going to be balanced, but just shorter. And talking of shorter, the other thing that needs to be short is your leader. Your 9 foot leader is going to be rubbish if you're fishing a creek that's 10 foot wide. Because how do you even get your fly line out? So when you fish smaller rivers, you want to make sure you've got a bunch of smaller leaders. A go-to one is going to be about 7.5 foot in length. That's a great creek size leader. You might change the X's. This is 4X. So if I'm fishing streamers, this would be a 7.5 foot leader, but maybe a 0X, something stiff enough to turn over a streamer. If I'm fishing soft hackles, I might have this 7.5 foot 4X right here. If you're fishing tiny dry flies, this will be 7.5 foot and probably a 6X. So your X might change, but you've got to have that short leader. And if you don't have a short leader and you just decide on the spur of the moment to go up for the creek for the day and you don't have a short leader, well, you can adapt your regular 9 foot leader like this. So here I have a regular 9 foot leader, way too long for a small creek. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find where the taper is, which is right in the center. There's the main taper. And I'm going to extend either side of that taper. I want to retain a bit of butt section and quite a bit of tippet section. In other words, don't chop everything off one end. So I would probably chop about 1.5 foot off the butt section, tie my loop in there, and then come down and you know what? I'm going to make this a really short leader because I'm fishing a tiny creek. So I'm going to come down here, chop it off at the front end, a little bit of the tippet there. This leader now is 6 foot long, perfectly castable leader. I've retained the butt section, I've retained the taper, and I've retained some tippet to tie on the flies with. So if you don't have those short leaders, you can certainly adapt the leaders you've got and make them fishable in small creeks. And really, that's all the specialty gear you need to fish these smaller rivers. You do need a few special casts to do that, and we're going to take a look at that in the very next chapter. All right, we're finally down at the creek. You've got this beautiful river in front of you, lots of water. It's beautiful to be out here in the sunshine and the shade. We're going to fish this little creek. First thing we've got to do is work out what casts you can utilize in a river like this. You can't always do your basic overhead cast. You don't have the room. You're in a small creek, so there's bound to be trees and narrow bits and rocks and things like that. So if you limit yourself to only knowing your basic overhead cast, you're going to come a cropper. You're going to find there's 90% of the river you aren't going to be able to fish. So let's take a look at some of the other casts. There's situations and the solutions to those situations that enable you to fly fish a small creek like this with a lot more chance of success. I've got my mate Nick here. As you can see, there's an overhanging tree. Under that tree, there's a nice slow pool. There's a bit of depth to it. There's obviously a trout lying in there. That's perfect trout country. But in this situation that Nick's fishing in now, he has no chance of getting his fly to that fish with an overhead cast. The overhead cast is going to drape on top of that branch, snag it. He'll either break the fly off or he'll shake the branch and scare the fish trying to get the fly off. In a situation like this, as you can see, Nick is utilizing the side cast. And that side cast is a perfect cast for small streams as it gets the line underneath the overhanging trees. Now the side cast does require a back cast. So in some places, hey, you can't even do a back cast, whether it's an overhead or a side cast. And in situations like this, you can see Nick right behind him, there's a wall of trees. No form of back cast can he utilize here. But the fish are in this pool and he's got to make some kind of cast to get the fly out to the fish. And in a situation like this is a cast called the roll cast that he's showing you now. It's a perfect cast when you don't have the room to make a back cast. So those are your two essential casts. And if you want to learn about those casts, check back on our previous episode, Other Useful River Casts, because that shows you how to perform and how actually to make these casts. Now, there are times when you can't really make any kind of cast. Check this spot out where Nick is now. He's completely surrounded by trees above him and all around him and behind him, and there's no way he can make a fly cast in this situation. Right now, in a place like this, he's doing what's called the bow and arrow cast. A very simple cast, doesn't give you any distance. It's an excellent solution for fishing these small creeks to get your fly out there when you can't even raise your rod to make any form of cast. So again, master that bow and arrow cast. That is a good one to utilize when it's so overgrown. And there's even some places on these small creeks where you can make no cast because you're on top of the fish. And if you're on top of the fish, they can't cast. You can't get any line out to make a cast. So in places like this is where you utilize a pendulum-type swinging cast that's called dapping. We call it dapping. And here you can see the piece of water that Nick is fishing right now is right under his rod tip. He can't cast in this situation, but he can utilize his dapping. You see he drops the fly in, he swings the line through that little bit of run and then lifts the rod tip up and just swings the fly back into the same position and drops it down again. So it's not even a cast. So there's very few spots. If you can get down to the water on a small creek like this and into the water or the water's edge, there's very few places you can't fish if you utilize those special casts. And once you've got those basic casts in your armory and you know how to perform these casts and you're ready to go and catch fish, well, let's take a look at the next step. Let's look at how you fish a small creek like this with a maximum chance of catching yourself a trout. So those are some of the unique casts that you need to know to fish little creeks like this. Right? You always never find problems where you're going to do overhead cast is going to be an issue. You're going to find issues and you need other casts to do it. So that's what you've got to do. You've got to learn some of those other basic casts. But outside of those casts, what else do you need to do to fish a small stream like this successfully? A couple of options. Well, one, you're going to be really close to the fish. You can see my mate Nick here fishing. He's right on top of the fish. So one of the things you'll do is you can spook fish. Stealth is pretty important. That means wear much drabber clothes. Generally, you want to keep quite low to the water so you're not a high skyline and the fish can spook because they see you walking along. You want to approach slowly, don't rush up to the water, and generally want to sit back and watch the pools you're going to fish from a distance and kind of work out the ways you want to fish before you get to them. Right? You don't want to do that when you get there because you're probably going to spook some fish. So those are some of your essential approaching tips. Now, in terms of fishing techniques, well, there's a lot of options, right? We can fish the regular dry fly. You come across a nice pool, fish are rising, there's caddis about, there's mayflies about, the fish are rising, so you can fish your regular dry fly, as we showed you in earlier chapters. You can fish your nymph if there's nothing rising. You can swing a streamer and fish a streamer and your soft tackle. So you've got your conventional fly fishing techniques that you can do in small streams. And they will work for sure. But outside of that, there's some special ways I think you should be aware of just to fish a small stream successfully. Perhaps the most deadliest approach for fishing a small creek with small little slots and buckets and pools like this is what's called the hopper dropper. And quite simply, the hopper dropper is you tie on a nice, large, very visible dry fly. It's got a lovely white wing. I can see this. It's huge. I'm going to throw this on the water, and then tied to the bend of that, I'm hanging down a nice weighted nymph. I want it weighted because I want it to sink really quickly in the water and get down. And this combination is called the hopper dropper. And what happens is the hopper floats on the water and the nymph dangles under the water. So you kind of cover the best of both worlds, right? You've got the dry fly on the top, so a fish might grab it because it's an opportunistic feeder. The dry fly is on the water for a few seconds, it grabs it. But equally, you've got this dropper, this weighted nymph underneath. And that's called a hopper dropper. And that's probably the best rig you can have if you fish a small stream and you just really have no idea how to do it, whether to fish dries or nymphs or streamers. The dropper depth between the dry fly and the heavy fly, well, that's going to be based on the pool. So you want to look at the depth of water. If it's a foot deep, you want to hang your nymph about 10 inches below the dry fly. And if it's 3 feet deep, you want to hang your nymph maybe 2.5 feet below the dry fly. So just take a look at the water, and that gives you an idea of the hopper-dropper technique. That's a really, really good technique. And as I said, probably my go-to for searching when I'm not fishing dries, streamers, soft tackles. In addition to that, there's a couple of other things you need to know. I think a couple of other armaments, if you like, for the small stream angler. One really useful technique is called the controlled drag. The controlled drag is really a beautifully simple technique that doesn't involve any casting. We talked about the casts earlier on, like the special river casts you need to fish in small streams and on rivers, but this controlled drag technique doesn't need any cast at all. What happens is you cast your line out once, and then all you do is you swing your rod to one side of the river, and you throw a couple of mends, and that swings the line nice and easily into the bank that you're fishing from. And then once your fly is under that bank, you bring your rod back to the other side of the river and throw some more mends, and what happens is that swings the fly back to the other side of the river. And so without casting, you can get your fly going from side to side, fishing all the buckets and all the slots, and without having to make any risky casts because overhanging trees. And that's where this particular technique excels, because you might have overhanging bushes, you might have rocks and stuff like that, and you don't really want to make that cast and risk losing your fly. Well, this controlled drag technique is an excellent technique, because as you can see, that line just sweeps in under the bank, right under where the fish will be lying, and it's a very, very safe spot. So the controlled drag is a really useful technique and very, very good for fishing small creeks like this because of the lack of casting room. Equally, if you don't have cast room, what else can you do? Well, the other thing, I think the best option of all is fishing what's called pocket water. Now, pocket water, you can take a look at a river like this, right? It's flowing, there's lots of white water, there's a few big rocks here, spread there, and behind those big rocks, or maybe even in front of those big rocks, there's these slow little buckets. And those buckets are called pockets. And that's what's called pocket water fishing. So your greatest success in this style of fishing is you're going to find the pockets, and you can probably fish your hopper-dropper technique in there, or you can cast a little dry fly, a caddis in there, or you can drop a nymph in and fish it, or even swing a little streamer through those pockets. But the essential part of pocket water fishing is you're literally just targeting the water, the percentage water where the fish are going to be. As you can see here, I've got a pool down here with a lot of current. There's a nice slow inside edge like that, and that slow inside edge are where fish are likely to be. They're not necessarily going to be in that fast water, because that fast water means they've got to work so hard. They're going to lie just on the edge of that fast water in that little slow bucket there. That's a perfect pocket to hit. You can throw your fly in there, drift it through that bucket, make 3 or 4 casts. You probably catch fish, maybe you don't. Hey, it doesn't matter. There's plenty more pockets. So you either work your way up the river or down the river, but you're hitting all these pockets as you do so. And again, generally speaking, if you want in a summary of the best approach I can give you for fishing small streams, it's going to be rig up your hopper dropper, it's going to be target these pockets, it's going to be keep yourself low, it's going to walk slowly, and above all, just remember that you're close to the fish, and that means be stealthy. Don't make any quick approaches, don't make any quick moves, just slowly, stealthily work your way up the river or work your way down the river. And fishing small streams really is about as simple as that. So there you have it, an array of adapted fishing techniques, new casts, subtle approaches, and other variations on a theme that will increase your chances of success when fly fishing in small creeks. I love the intimacy and personal nature of such wonderful Lilliputian fisheries, and I hope you do too. As always, I want to end this episode with a friendly reminder to do your part in keeping the river clean and the fish healthy. Look after the environment. Leave no trace of your visit to the water, and treat those fish you catch with the utmost respect. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and also hope to see you on the water one day putting your newfound skills to great use. Thanks a lot for watching.